Alright guys, hope you're doing well. I want to talk a little bit about relationships today. The reason I want to talk about this particular topic is because it's something there's a lot of things that have been going on in my private life. And I just thought I would kind of share a few of my thoughts really about this whole topic of love and relationships, marriage. As I've mentioned before on my channel, I'm married and I've been in a long-term relationship here now for almost 10 years. Next, November, I think December next year, I'll have been with the same person for about 10 years. And I can tell you that I've learnt a lot in that time about myself, about my wife, and about our dynamics, and how things have changed over the past 5 years. I think we all start off in life really when we're young, these ideas of romanticised love and these idealised kind of images of eternal love and this kind of eternal romantic phase, this eternal kind of honeymoon phase, and unfortunately life doesn't really work like that, sadly. When we're younger, we tend to be a bit more idealistic, I think, a bit more hopeful about life and about just the world in general, really. We haven't developed enough experience in life yet, so we don't really know what the realities are. And I think we go into relationships with these kind of Hollywood depictions of what it means to be romantic, what it means to love somebody, especially with the kind of stories that we see as kids and cartoons and children-based movies about love. And so we grow up with these unrealistic expectations of what it really means to truly love someone. What it truly means to understand somebody and deal with the difficulties that come with long-term relationships. It's all good and well when you start a relationship, when you go into that honeymoon phase and your emotions are sky high and everything feels wonderful and great, and I wouldn't deny that. I wouldn't even deny my worst enemies that opportunity, that amazing period of infatuation and kind of naivety, I suppose, in many ways. We've all been through it, or most of us have, at least once in our lives, and it's an amazing thing. It really is an incredible thing. It can inspire us, it can push us to be something, to become more of ourselves. But at the same time, it's often the thing that I suppose in many respects, it's the thing that we cling on to the most as we go on in relationships, as time moves on. And, time takes its toll, and life takes its toll on our bodies and our minds and our emotional states. And as the years go on and, we'll become more and more familiar with each other, kind of just the same way in many ways as friendships develop. We kind of become it just becomes normal, and everything kind of the emotional stuff settles down, and it becomes it just becomes a situation where you look at each other as you both truly are, and that is flawed human beings with their own specific wants, their own specific needs, their own hang-ups, their own insecurities about the way they look, about their pasts, about the present, their concerns about the future, their worries about whether the relationship's still, if it's still going in the right direction, if it's healthy anymore, if it's really worth tolerating the stuff that most people at a certain point tolerate in relationships. And I think what a lot of young people don't realise is that, especially those that haven't had a girlfriend yet or haven't had a long-term relationship yet, is I would I would say to those people that don't be so quick to rush into things, because you don't understand, you don't always know what you're getting yourself into, you don't always truly, you don't know how things are going to work out, and you don't know the reasons, you don't always know other reasons why you're getting into things until later on. And I think I would say more than anything else, you learn more about yourself in relationships than you do about the other person, because you get to know the mundane version of that person, but you don't always know you don't always know everything about them, unless they're more willing to open up. But I think as time goes on and things just become normal, and you kind of almost stop paying attention to the other person in a way, because you're so used to seeing them, you're so used to hearing them, you're so used to them being around that you kind of, they're present, but they're not really, you're aware of their presence, but you're not really taking much notice. It's more of a kind of peripheral type of thing, I suppose. Which I think in the end is one of the many reasons why, I would say overall, why relationships start to decline. Really, there are multiple factors in the decline and decay of relationships. It's a decline in meaningful, healthy communication. It's unfulfilled desires, fantasies, wants, needs. It's a longing for something new. It's a longing for independence, a sense that things just aren't working out, and you just want to be liberated from it all. It's it's the arguments, it's the bickering, the pettiness, the fact that at some point in some relationships at a certain stage, people essentially kind of become irritated and annoyed by everything the other person does, and eventually it just becomes this endless, never-ending phase of just frustration, really. And alongside that stuff, of course, as you get older, as you get to your late 30s and 40s, your looks start to decline, and so you don't quite find each other as sexually appealing or sexually attractive as much as you used to. And obviously with that, you don't have as much confidence in yourself anymore, and that has a knock-on effect on how you behave and how you respond in your relationship, because it damages your image, it damages your attraction, your sense of attractiveness to the other person. And if you don't feel good in yourself anymore, it's like it's gonna show, and the other person's gonna notice it. And at some point, that lack of confidence spills over, and it turns into, a dead bedroom, basically. It turns into a lack of intimacy. It turns into two people basically doing their own things, not really bothering with each other anymore. They're both present, but they're not actively engaged with each other anymore. It's like, for all intents and purposes, they're kind of just acquaintances almost. They're kind of, they're friends without the benefits. And so, and in many cases, actually, people become sort of develop a sense of hatred towards each other, because resentment sets in, and people feel like they've wasted their best years and their youth, and it's very sad. It's very, very sad, because two people that went into the relationship liking each other, loving each other, trying, being intimate, having an actively interesting and engaging sexual life, and and obviously having their own relationship-based hobbies and trips away places and being outgoing, it develops into this very cold, distant, kind of just very kind of void, really. And then we look, and when we get to this place where we no longer feel that we're seen or heard or feel attractive anymore, that's when things start to spiral out of control, and one or the other person at some point starts clinging on to something to cope with it, whether that's staring at the phones all night long, whether that's reading a book, whether it's going out with the friends, whether that's having an affair. That I don't condone having affairs, cheating, of course not, but I think at some point people just break, and they crack under the pressure and the stress of it all, and they just feel like they've just got to get away from it, got to break out of it. And that's essentially then the beginning of the end. It's not one thing that ruins a relationship. It's a multitude of things that pile up over time. That things that were once healthy, things that once gelled you together as a couple, and now the very things that no longer work anymore. Then they no longer maintain the relationship. They no longer. The scaffolding starts to fall apart, and bit by bit, a piece of the scaffolding is taken out, and because essentially that's what relationships are. They're a series of scaffolding pieces that are put together, and they work for so long, but over time that they get weathered, pieces need to be replaced, bits get damaged, and bits just kind of things just kind of you just get corrosive over time, I guess, and that's often because of life events, and it's just endless stress at work, endless stress with money all the time. It's just a general sense, I think, just a general sort of, especially as you get to midlife, just a kind of general malaise about life and about people, and you just start to get really tired of it all. You just start to get really bogged down, and so you've got all of that external stuff going on anyway as an individual, and then you've got all of the stuff happening at home with your partner, your wife, your girlfriend, and it's just I think just in the end, just people just reach a stage where they just say, I can't deal with this anymore. I can't cope with this excessive, it's one thing to tolerate the outside world, but then when you've got to come back in your own little private, what's supposed to be your own little haven, your own little place of comfort, and face more of it. I mean, it just gets so fucking exhausting, to the point where you just say, you know what, I just can't anymore. I can't tolerate this anymore. I can't deal with this. There's just, and as much as you want to try, and as much as you might love the other person, there just comes a point where one of the other people just have to say, look, we have a go to therapy, we have a try and find something that's like, can salvage whatever's left of our relationship, our marriage here, or we have to walk away from each other because we're not making each other's lives better anymore. And it's, of course, all relationships, all marriages go through ups and downs and periods of instability and change, and that's part of life. I accept that. Just as much as like friendships, even with relationship, connections with your family can go through upheavals and stresses, and sometimes periods where you don't talk to each other for whatever reasons. And I'm not saying that life is this smooth, flat surface. It's like it's. I accept that life is. It is a very wild ride. And just in general, even when you're not in a romantic relationship, life's difficult anyway. But I think when you add on all the stress and all the problems and pressures of trying to maintain a relationship with someone, it becomes, and there's a reason why people end up having nervous breakdowns, because they just boil over. They just spill over, the emotions, the weight of all the psychological exhaustion of just the endless thing of just feeling stuck all the time, and just not really, and just the endless cold shoulders, the passive aggressiveness, and the petty point scoring, the arguments, silence, because nobody knows what to say, and everyone concerned in the relationship is doesn't really want to start an argument, so they kind of just think, I just won't bother what to say, what's really on my mind, and and that just kind of that fuels it. So you end up in this place where you feel like if you say something, it's going to cause a problem, but if you don't do something at some point, it's going to make things worse. So you end up in this like constant like dilemma like state, almost a kind of like no man's land or no woman's land kind of like place in a relationship where neither of the people involved like just know what to do anymore. They don't know what to say. They don't want to start an argument. They don't want to get kicked out the fucking bedroom. They don't want to get kicked out of the house, or they don't want to go out one day and come back and find there are all the bags outside the door or something. I think you really have to be careful who you get involved with in this world. I really do, because people can ruin your lives, whether intentional or not. People can indirectly have a massive impact on your mental health and your direction of your life, even if there not be any. Maybe they don't always mean to, but sometimes people, because of their own insecurities, their own baggage, their own psychological stuff that's going on, their own, different levels of trauma, different levels of whatever it is, just worries and unfulfilled, unrealized dreams and goals and expectations, and it just becomes a stage where two people just say, there's just no point. There's just no point anymore. It's not going to work. it's not happening anymore. We're not, we're both not feeling this anymore. And you just, some point, surely there just comes a point where you just have to say, look, I love you, you love me, but it's just not working, is it? It's just not working. It's just not working, is it? Let's face it. Because, you can't just continue to go on feeling like shit all the time, every single day. It's like life's too short for that. It really is. You don't have enough time to be sitting around like just in a miserable, unhappy situation. It's like at the end of the day, it's not right. It's not fair on yourself, and it's not fair on the other person involved either. It's like that's not how you should live your life. You should live your life trying to be as happy as you can be, to try and find some joy in life, and to try and, at the very least, try and have some kind of contentment about who you are and where you are in life. And I think when relationships start to become dysfunctional, it's like, in the back of your mind, like, it's a matter of time before this thing comes to an end, and you can feel it. You can feel it years before it happens. You can feel it a long time. There's always red flags. There's always things that you kind of gloss over, and you think, there's nothing. I'm not going to bother. It's not going to take any action on that. It's just me being anxiety prone, whatever. But later on, you realise that your gut instinct was right. Your intuition was right, and you didn't listen to it. You didn't pay any notice to it, because I think we really do. A lot of us, I think, live in denial. I don't really think most of us truly do live in the real world when it comes to relationships, and just how difficult it is to stay in love with somebody. It's like sometimes you don't even really truly know if you even are in love with that person anymore. It's just that you've just gotten so used to to living that way that it just becomes a way of life. It becomes that is your norm. That is your normality. That just as it is as life for other people is. It's their normal world to be, at least for the time being, to be single, or to be going through a divorce, or getting married, or entering a relationship, entering their first relationship. It's. And I think a lot of the time, a lot of the breakdown of relationships just comes down to two people that no longer. Then they've just reached such a state of romantic or apathy, I suppose. I think just people just get to a point where they just can't see any reason to continue tolerating the other person, because then there's nothing in return for it, And that's where all the frustration's setting. It's where I think a lot of it really just comes down to a long period of dissatisfaction, a long period of denying what you know deep down to be true. We've all been there. We've all been in situations in life where we knew, in the back of our minds, we knew something wasn't right, but we just kept pretending, kept going on, kept living in denial, and oh no, everything's okay, everything's fine. It's not, it's just being paranoid, and and that can last for years, even decades sometimes, because you just don't want to believe it. You don't. And people are so desperate. So people just can't stand the thought of being alone by themselves for so long. It's like, I get it as well. Nobody wants to be alone forever. Everyone wants to have a chance at love and have a chance of kind of playing out this kind of like fantasy that we've been sold for so long through TV and movies and culture in general, society in general, that all you have to do is get married and have kids and buy that house you both want and buy that car and have a few holidays per year. It's like, well, that's all good. They're all trimmings of a relationship, but I think if you both aren't really, I think in the end, if you're both in a relationship mainly because it's something that's, I think if you're going into relationships as a way of escaping who you are as a person, that will just inevitably lead to dysfunctional, toxic relationships. And I say that because of my own experiences. Okay, and I'm not just projecting, I'm not just making assumptions here. I'm being real about it. It's like, I think it's really a thing of, when you're not satisfied with who you are, you go looking for something to fill it. You go looking for someone to fill that hole in yourself. I don't mean that literally. I just mean that there's a part of our emotional personality or our psychological personality that seems to require a balance. It requires something to make us forget about those things, or to put it at the back of our minds, and I just don't think it's healthy. It's not when if you don't work on yourself in the end, I think if you don't really understand yourself, if you don't accept who you really are as a person, then you'll always run into trouble with people, always. Especially if you've got insecurities piled up. It just won't work out for you. It just won't. It just, you'll just always be unhappy. You'll always be unhappy because you're not truly content with who you are. And so you're always looking for that person to block out, I guess, that those parts of yourself that you don't really like, the things, or there's we've all got them. We've all got insecurities. We've all got things we're jealous about. We've all got things we're resentful about, and we're just parts of ourselves that we don't feel were fulfilled for some reason along the way. Maybe someone did us over, maybe we have some sort of messed up relationship with our parents, or maybe one of our siblings or something. It doesn't, I don't know. I just don't think that, I think most people, I would say for the most part, most relationships are basically more about, I'd say a couple of things. It's about comfort, familiarity, companionship, money, sex, the potential of having children. Some people just want to fulfill that kind of need in themselves. And I would say that it's also about feeling secure, feeling stable, feeling like somebody gets you, feeling like somebody understands who you really are. But I think there are layers to that, really. I think people can know you to a point, but I think in the end, most people aren't really truly honest with each other about about each other, and about they're most deeper inner issues and baggage and whatever. And so people with unresolved trauma, unresolved emotional baggage, and psychological hang-ups or whatever it is, people carry that forward. They carry it into their relationships. They carry it into their friendships. They carry it into their place of work. They carry it over into the way that they talk to random people. They carry it over into the way that they become parents. And this is why so many people are deeply troubled. This is why so many relationships, long-term relationships, don't work, because people are messy. Relationships are very complicated. You've got two very different individuals, usually, with their own unique set of historical circumstances, their own paths in life, their own experiences, their own interpretations of the world, their own uniquely sort of their own specific upbringing factors. And people, it's like you can, just because someone loves someone doesn't mean that they truly understand them. It's like you can love someone and still not really know who they are. You can love someone, and if I was actually to say, in many cases, often love tends to kind of blind people, because we become overly emotional and less logic. And I think that's something that happens over time, is we bond with somebody, but we become less logical, we become less rational, because we let our emotions take over. And I'm no exception. I've done that in myself, and I've been incredibly naive and didn't have any real foresight, didn't plan ahead, didn't think about the future, became careless, carefree. And, just kind of over time, things just sort of accumulated in the relationship, and sort of habits just set in, and boredom set in, and, at some point you don't really have much to talk about, really, for the most part, unless you've not seen each other for a few days or a few weeks or something, which is why I think it's probably better in many ways for you to live apart. If you're going to be in a long-term relationship, live apart. Don't live in the same space, unless you've got kids. Especially as time goes, relationships are all good and great when you're in your 20s and 30s, because you're still young, and you've still got your looks, and that kind of binds you together when you're young. That sexual appeal, that lustfulness, that want to jump into bed with each other. That works for a period of time, but as you get older, your looks start to go, and you don't, like I said before, you don't really find yourself that attractive anymore. It's and that then starts to damage your self-image. It damages your sense of sexual appeal to your partner or whoever. We all like feeling attractive. We all like to feel sexy. We all like to feel like we are sexually attracted to, the sex of whatever it is we're attracted to. So, and when that starts to decline, and as you get into your mid to late 30s and 40s, 50s onwards, time takes its toll on your body, and your metabolism starts slowing down. Estrogen levels change, obviously in women, and testosterone levels change in men. That then often leads to, more weight gain as you get older, and as a result of that, it not massively knocks your confidence, and then you kind of just give up, I think. Once your looks start to have gone, it's like you basically just kind of just say, fuck it, there's no point anymore. And I think at that point, that's why a lot of people in middle age tend to put on weight, because they don't like the way they look anymore. Because they don't like the way they look anymore, it makes them feel shitty about themselves. And they kind of just reach a point where there's no point then. Why bother going to the gym? Why bother dieting anymore? Why bother taking care of myself? And if you're already in a kind of comfortable relationship, and you've been in one for years, you kind of just get to the point where you feel like you're accepted for just who you are. It doesn't really matter where you put on a few fucking stone or whatever. It's because, and that's the mistake we often make, both as men and women. I think we get to that point where we just become kind of just dependent on each other. We get used to this idea that we're going to be together for the rest of our lives. Really, we get comfortable and everything becomes familiar. That's that works for a period of time, but then there comes a point where you start to get tired of that. You start to become resentful of that fact. It's like, because there was a point in a relationship where you had to work harder, where you had to, really work on yourself, not just to get the person, but because there was a part of your brain thought was thinking, and rightfully so, that there's competition out there. So I better up my game. I better work on myself. I better put in some effort here. And when that stops, or when that declines, which it does naturally in most people's relationships after a certain stage. I'd certainly probably say after the 5 to 10 year mark. That's where problems start setting in. If you're not exercising anymore, then obviously you're gonna gain weight, and obviously if you're gaining weight, that's gonna make you feel insecure. And that's the thing that tends to happen. In my experience, and what I'm observing other people's relationships, is that people's deep insecurities start to come to the surface. People's emotional baggage and resentments and trauma start to bubble to the surface, and it all gets at some point laid out in front of each other, and it can be incredibly uncomfortable. It can be incredibly difficult to navigate around. And the reason for that is because your partner basically becomes a reflection of yourself. It's like, it's a reflection, especially if things haven't worked out or aren't working out as well as they should be. Then you're basically in a spot where you're looking at all of your insecurity. You're seeing the other person, all your mistakes. You're seeing them, and so there's this projection phase that relationships tend to go through before they kind of just implode. And that's where all the finger point starts, where it's all the accusations start. It's where all of the petty, childish arguments and bickering start, and it just turns into it just becomes a kind of, it's just like a suction. It's like watching the water drain out from the sink or your bath or whatever. It just like starts off slowly, and then it kind of just all goes out. It just sort of, gravity just sucks it under, all of it under, and it's like that. And that's what I think. That's really the point where most relationships, I think, basically are kind of, most relationships are over usually months or years before they're actually officially over. And actually, a lot of people go through anticipatory grief long before the relationship's over. And I think for a lot of women, that's why they seem to kind of be cold and sort of come across as being cold and heartless and cruel by the time it's over. It's not because they are; it's because they've gone through all of that stuff long before the relationship. Once they've reached that, I think essentially people make the decision to leave their relationship long before they actually tell the other person. Long before. Could be years, might even be a decade before. It's like, but people often stay in a relationship because it's kind of a bit messy. Maybe you need the other person for some reason or other, or you're kind of waiting around to kind of sort of put a plan in place to leave it. And that's essentially really why a lot of the reason why people stay in toxic, unhealthy relationships is because they can't escape it straight away. And they keep kind of like living in doubt and denial. And so most people just they're staying in dysfunctional relationships because I think to some extent, admittedly, there's an element of toxic enjoyment out of it. But eventually that turns into very, very dark, sour stuff, and it just becomes a point where you just both realise, we can't go on like this. This is not what we got into a relationship for. This is not how I want to be remembered. This is not how I. And it's just, like I said, it's just very sad, man. Very sad when people end up in that place. It's when two people that once would have done anything for each other, would have had each other's backs, and it's the same with friendships as well. It's like it's just such a shame, man. Such a shame when there's just so many things that have just become, it's a pile of different problems that accumulate over time, and I think people just get to the stage where they say it's like we can't fix this, because I don't think there's enough incentives to fix it. I don't think there's enough tolerance left in people to tolerate it anymore. There's nothing really to gain from it. We've had and I think there's just a general sense with people over a period of time that I think relationships just kind of run the course. They have the time, much like friendships do, and the longer you stay in a relationship, the more difficult it is to stay in it. Because there's so many different things that the quality of it declines, and so you start looking elsewhere for things to try and you start to look for things that aren't there in your relationship anymore. So it's a mixture of like being disappointed with yourself, disappointed with the other person. It's a mixture of that and kind of feeling disillusioned with love and intimacy. We get sold these ideas of this happy ending like situation in long-term relationships, as if they're just always going to be smooth sailing and they're always going to work out, and the vast majority of relationships don't work out. That is the reality of that. Is just the reality of human nature, men and women, men and men, women and women. It's just what it is, It's and even if relationships do pan out and somehow two people manage to stay together for years or decades, those relationships, in many cases, aren't, I wouldn't exactly say fulfilling, but it just becomes the point where I suppose two people just feel like that they've lived so long together that they just couldn't see themselves living apart from each other. It just becomes a habitual kind of thing, a dependent, reliant kind of relationship, codependent type thing. And especially once people kind of stop prioritizing their own health, their self-care, the way they look. It's that the things that drew you together eventually, once the things that drew you together initially aren't there anymore, you better find something very quickly to replace it, or you should expect that relationship to decline over time and basically end in two people becoming incredibly unhappy with each other and about themselves. And everything fuels into each other, and it just becomes a real cauldron of just really sort of horrible, toxic shit stuff here. I mean, it really does become very, very vile in the end. It becomes very, very unpretty, it really does. And I say that as someone that went through a very, very bad breakup that ended up that way, so I do know what I'm talking about. But again, I accept that was also part of. I was also part to blame for that. But that does happen with people all the time when one person's needs aren't being met enough anymore. And I think over time, like, people want more and more and more and more out of their partners. It's not enough anymore. It becomes a stage where, like, it almost becomes kind of like an addiction. It becomes an addiction to toxicity. You become addicted to the arguments, the drama, endless, craving for attention, and because that's essentially what it comes down to in the end. It's like because the sex dies away, the intimacy dies away, you start looking for some kind of a connection, some kind of attention, and often it turns into toxicity through arguments and drama. That's what happens. Everything turns into toxic ways of getting the things that used to be healthy. it's as you age as well, I think you just don't have the same levels of tolerance anymore to deal with certain things. And I think, just a build up of various forms of frustration, coupled with aging, coupled with stress, coupled with whatever it is that's going on around you in your immediate world, and the wilder world as well, or whether it's whatever it might be. A lot of things build up in us. We don't realise, I think, just how much negative shit we accumulate because of not working on ourselves before we enter relationships, because of being naive and expecting the other person to be some kind of a magic potion to all of our problems, and that's the thing, is we project everything onto other people. We it's just really unfair, really. I just think it's incredibly. I just don't think it's fair that people get kind of put in a place in their relationship where they're expected to fulfill all the needs and wants of the other person, and you just can't. Because over time it becomes more and more and more and more and more, and it just becomes exhausting. As you age, your energy levels drop anyway. You don't have the patience anymore. Lifestyle changes, your prioritization start changing, especially as your parents pass away, or maybe you're one of the two of your siblings, and it's just kind of just in general really. It's just bad habits setting over time. Comfort leads to bad habits. It leads you to develop unhealthy traits that become toxic over time. And so that then becomes, the other person ends up resenting you because you get too comfortable. And then what happens then is that people start to overcompensate and do more and more and more and more for the other person, but they never quite get that satisfaction or attention or intimacy, no matter what they do. And that's often in terms of men. That's why I think often why a lot of men, end up having affairs, end up running away, cut off the relationship, because they no longer feel like there's no appreciation towards them anymore. There's no affection. There's no joy in it. There's nothing in return. And I don't think most men are selfish, really. I think most men, often in relationships, pretty much, I would say the vast majority of male and female relationships, as in, traditional kind of heterosexual relationships, I think most of the time it's mostly, well, I don't know, I think it's a bit of like both, but I would say in certain ways men probably do more for their partners than women do, but in other ways women do more for their partners than the other. So I don't know, it's difficult to really say. I don't want to generalize here. I don't want to stereotype or anything like that, or perpetuate kind of notions of gender roles. But I think there are certain behaviours that men are drawn to over time that actually don't serve them that don't serve them well, that don't help them. But because they think that they're helping, they think that they're trying to do things to help their partner or their life, but what they're really doing is just kind of ignoring the deeper issues that are going on, the deeper conversations that need to be had. So people, one or the other starts to lose motivation, so they start doing less and less for the other person. And, they just think till one of the other person just wakes up one morning, looks in the mirror and just says, fucking, I'm 50 now. I'm 50 years old, I'm 60 years old, I don't want to do this shit no more. There's no point. There's nothing to gain from this anymore. I'm fucking miserable, been miserable for the past 20 years. It's time to walk away. And thankfully some people do that at a younger age, whether they're in the 30s or 40s, but for a lot of people, it's I won't say it's too late, but it's they should have done it a lot sooner. And I think, if I'm being honest with you, that's kind of where I feel like I'm at now. I'm just kind of looking at myself in the mirror and seeing myself getting older and thinking to myself, is this all there is? Is this what I spent the last 10 years of my life for? Was it worth it? What was it worth all of that crap that I had to tolerate? I'm not getting any younger. I'm not getting any more attractive. I put on some weight. I stopped working out, and I gave up. And a lot of it's down to the very things that we've been discussing in this video. I'm just generally feeling just a sense of kind of disgust with myself sometimes, shame, embarrassment, frustration, sadness, anger, disappointment, being disillusioned with a relationship. I'm just kind of going into my own headspace a lot of the time and kind of distancing myself, I suppose, and trying to protect myself from what I think is probably the inevitable outcome of this relationship, and that is that it's not working. It's just not working anymore. It's not working. It's not healthy. It's not going anywhere. Neither of us seems to really like the other person that much anymore, as far as I can tell. As far as attraction goes, forget it. I mean, don't get me wrong, I found my wife to be relatively good looking. I'm not going to sit here and say she's an ugly woman, because she's not, but she's certainly, she's changed, okay, and I have too over the last 10 years, as you would expect. We both don't look as good as we used to. I still like her, I still find her to be good looking, but I can't, as much as it's horrible to sit here and say that I particularly find her as sexually attractive anymore. And I think that she probably feels the same way about me, and I would say probably even more so from her side. I put on a bit of weight around the stomach, and it's difficult, because it's difficult when you reach a point where you are the problem, and you have to make a decision because the other person doesn't want to lose face. You see, that's where I'm at. Is I now have to make a decision for both of us, basically, because she won't. She doesn't want to make the decision for all sorts of reasons, mainly because of the potential consequences of losing face here. But anyway, that's enough about my personal circumstances. But yeah, definitely feeling unattractive and a lack of intimacy is a really, really serious problems that I think a lot of people just can't get over. It's like, essentially you have to find something else to replace that at some point in a relationship as time goes on. You can expect a little bit of decline in sort of sexual compatibility or whatever, but at some point you have to find something that replaces that. You're not gonna have a crazy sex life forever, and you're certainly not always going to get what you want out of it, even if you do. So you can pretty much forget that. You can put that on the shelf of other naive expectations, long-term expectations. That's one of the first things that goes out the window, because essentially, really, I think for many women, they give you sex for as long as they're willing to give out their bodies in exchange for whatever it is they need, and also until the point where they feel like they've got you. Basically, now they've got you, they feel a sense of stability and security with you, and that's all good and great. But then that becomes a situation of, I've got what I wanted now, so there's no incentive for me to do this. And also, just over time, as kind of said before in other videos, as women age, they go through menopause, and obviously that plays havoc with their emotions and how they feel about each other, how they feel about their partners, and all that kind of stuff. And obviously men go through kind of a similar kind of thing in a way, but it's more of a mental, emotional upheaval period, really, whether that's a few months or a few years, otherwise known as a midlife crisis. So, it's natural to go through some changes and to face some challenges in any relationship. That's for sure. But the problem is, it's in the end you have to make a choice as, is it worth staying in this relationship? What am I getting out of it? And I don't mean that to sound like selfish, it's like, oh well, it's all about me. It's only about me in this relationship. I don't mean like that. I just mean that, if you're giving yourself to your other partner, you're putting in work and attention and doing things for her, then you should expect some of it in return. That's the way I see it. That's what a relationship should be. And I think if it is the case that you're not, it doesn't have to be exactly the same things, but I think if you feel like you're putting more in than you're getting out of it, just like it would be with a friendship or a job, I think you do have to start asking yourself some serious questions at some point. You have to say, is it, what am I getting out of this? Like, what, how is this adding any kind of quality to my life? How is this making my life better? Is this making life more enjoyable for me, or is it making it worse? Would I be better off being unhappy being single, or unhappy being unhappy in a relationship, in a marriage? That's essentially what it comes down to. That's the brutal honesty. It's like, you're going to be happy anywhere and unhappy at times anywhere in life. That's just the nature of being a human being. You're not going to be happy all the time. You're going to be depressed at times. You're going to be pissed off with the world. You're going to be tired of people. You're going to be tired of life. You're going to be tired of looking at yourself in the mirror. You're going to be tired of just, life gets exhausting the older you get, and so you have to decide what you feel like is worth tolerating for you in the end. If it's not being in a relationship, then you better be single. If you don't want to be married anymore, then you better get divorced. If you don't want to be single anymore, then try and find someone, try and meet someone. That's the end of it. But just be careful. Like I say, always be careful what you wish for, man. You don't know. Sometimes you're just better off on your own in this world, I think. I really believe it. Sometimes you're just better off just having your own little space, your own little bubble, your own little world, and just be polite and kind as best as you can. And if you can get some other joys out of life, then go for it. But in the end, you really do have to be happy with who you are as best as you can. Because otherwise, that shit just bleeds over into every area of your life if you're not. And on top of it, you've obviously got all your regrets and guilt and life mistakes and, just the exhaustion of being who you are, especially if you're a deep thinker like me, or more introverted and you're a divergent, then obviously that kind of complicates things in many ways, especially if you're with someone that's not like that. That can really be difficult to navigate around. And I think, honestly, that's why this relationship's doomed, because, and it doesn't fill me with any joy to say that, but I'm just being honest about it. We're just two very different people, and I just don't really think it's just not, there's no engagement in it. There's no excitement in it anymore. There's nothing of interest. There's no joy in it. And we don't challenge each other. We don't make each other think. We don't push each other. We don't motivate each other. We don't share in anything meaningful together anymore. And that right there, that very thing, that one thing, is the absolute killer of relationships. When you're no longer doing things together, you can forget it. You might as well write that relationship off. You might as well just pack your bags now and leave. Because it just will not work. If you're no longer getting any joy out of experiencing things together, whatever that is, I don't know, traveling, going to places, I don't know, whatever it is you like doing. If you're not doing things together anymore, forget it. If all you basically do is just stare at your phones and more than you do the other person, How long is that sustainable for? How long do you think that relationship can survive? I mean, come on, let's get real. Let's get real about it. It means that they're no longer interested in what you've got to say or spending time with you because they're more engrossed in something else, because they're trying to cope. They're trying to cope with the reality of that they don't love you anymore, but they don't really want to get rid of you because you're convenient in some way, but they don't want to give out because they don't feel anything towards you anymore. That's essentially where it ends up. And so frustrations build up, and it just eventually leads to some massive argument, which is usually the trigger then that causes the very end of a relationship. It's usually either cheating, an affair, a massive argument that spirals out of control. Someone says something that should have been said years ago that's just brutally honest and true, and it obviously hits a nerve. Or someone just says, I'm sorry, but it's just over. It's not you. It's not you. It's me. Bullshit. Even though it is the other person probably more than it is you, but sometimes. But yeah, so it's just unresolved frustrations and baggage and trauma and shit that builds up, and it just makes you two people become incredibly moody with each other, and you just basically just get to a point where you just find it's easier just to stay quiet, just to kind of do your own thing and like acknowledge each other from time to time. But essentially, you just basically are just kind of roommates. That's all you are. When things aren't working out, you just become roommates. There's no sex anymore. There's no intimacy anymore. Maybe the odd bit of affection here and there. But essentially, for the most part, really, the connection's gone. There's no spark anymore. There's no flame. There's no connection. There's no energy left in it. It's just run its course. There's no resilience to change anymore. There's no tolerance no extra tolerance, reserves of resilience left over anymore. And it just gets harder and harder to bounce back from things. It gets harder to have the conversations that need to be had, to make the changes, because one or the other person is going to get offended, going to get sensitive about something. And I just think over time, just pessimism builds up, apathy, defeatism. I think, once you reach the point of defeatism, it becomes a self-fulfilling thing then, I think. So you do have to have self-improvement in a relationship. You have to have honesty. You have to have compatibility in all sorts of different ways. You have to actually like spending time around each other. You actually have to enjoy each other's company. And I'm not just talking about sex. I'm talking about being alone with each other, like just being vulnerable with each other. And not everybody's ready for that. Not everyone has the emotional, psychological maturity to deal with that stuff. So relationships become boring, and obviously dead bedroom setting. And it just as libido changes and hormones change, and people become kind of less interested and just don't have the energy for it anymore, which can then make the other person kind of feel crap about themselves because why is it the case? Is it me? What have I done? What have I said? What's wrong? And often people don't confront these kind of things because it's too much of a delicate kind of thing to talk about, because it'll either lead to the breakup of a relationship or it'll lead to arguments, and that could make things worse temporarily. But so people just aren't ready. It's so many angles to this, so many complicated factors involved in it, And I think in the end, for especially for women, I think just the role of being intimate and sexually kind of compatible, sexually appealing to their partners just becomes more of a chore. It becomes more of a job, really. It's not something they want to do naturally anymore. You have to put more and more effort into it. You almost kind of have to role play. That's probably why role playing is so popular in relationships after a certain point, because that's the only thing you've got left. You have to kind of almost convince each other that you're still attracted to each other, you still like each other. Because I don't mean that you're not necessarily, but it's the passion, the passion that you once had for each other is not there. So you have to put something in place that boosts, and obviously just over time, men start going through their own issues with, sexual problems, and it just becomes really just difficult, really, really, really difficult for men and women in long-term relationships, especially as the reach the point of midlife and beyond it, it's extremely difficult. Essentially, I think in many ways, relationships are for young people. There's the reason why a lot of older people are alone and tend to stay alone for after a certain point, because it's easier. They're more happy, they're more fulfilled, more content. They feel a sense of more freedom and independence that they might have not had for so long, and they feel more just content in their overall kind of everything about them. So I just think that, it's just be kind of careful what you wish for when it comes to relationships and love, and don't go into it with too many expectations, and don't be too naive about men or women, because they're only humans, and they all have their own problems, and they all have their own stuff that they haven't told you about because it's too difficult, it's too taboo. And so I think you just have to be honest, and you have to have empathy, but you also have to be realistic. You have to be willing to be vulnerable. You have to be willing to open up. You have to be willing to confront difficult things about each other. You have to be willing to accept when things aren't working. And that takes guts. It's hard to admit when something's not working anymore. It's hard to admit that you've got to go your own separate ways. Nobody likes that. People are drawn to comfort. People are drawn to things that provide them a sense of safety and security in life. And nobody likes change, really. Nobody likes to have to walk it alone in life because they failed, or to go back, to go forwards, kind of thing. And that is life. That is the fucking brutalness of life, man. I'm telling you, I've had it before. And it's you want to talk about fucking dark, depressing realizations, and dealing with the real world out there. People haven't got a fucking clue. You've got people on this platform talking about being in their early 20s or mid to late 20s, talking about never ever having partners and stuff like that. And I feel sorry for them, and I get that their frustrations, and I sympathise with them to a certain extent, but they also don't realise the extent of what it is to truly be in love with somebody. It's all good and well having this teenage romantic, this kind of excessively romanticised view of love and relationships, but you haven't been in one. You don't understand. You don't understand it. You don't know what you're talking about. Like I said, I feel sorry for these people because I know what it's like to be alone. I've been there. I get it. I understand. Okay, fair enough. I don't know what it's like to have never had a girlfriend, but I've been lonely. I've spent many years alone without a girlfriend. It's not like I've had my entire life been spent living with another woman. It's only since my early 20s. Throughout my teens, I didn't have anybody. I didn't have a girlfriend. Didn't really have a girlfriend. I didn't really get any real interactions or interest from women. So I get the whole black pill movement stuff. I get it. I understand it. I can relate to it in many, many ways. But I also think that there's a lot of delusionment. There's a lot of naivety in it. There's a lot of inexperience. They don't really truly know how complex these things are. They don't know what they don't. They want these things, but I can guarantee you, if they got into them, they'd have a very different perception. They would I wish I was just still single now. I wish I'd never met you. I wish I never had a girlfriend. I was better off before when I didn't have a girlfriend. When I didn't. And sometimes, honestly, when I look back over my life, I think to myself, I wish I hadn't have met the people I met. Wish I'd have just stayed single for longer. I wish I'd have worked on myself before I ever jumped into relationships. But you know what? Hindsight's 2020. It's tough shit. All that time's gone by. It is what it is. I'm heading towards my 40 now. My 40th birthday in a few years. It's too late. I made my fucking mistakes. That's it. No point sitting there, crying to yourself all day long. It's like that. That's life. That's life. Get over it. Fucking deal with it. That's it. I don't want to come across as being cold or anything, but it's like, that's life. Life's fucking cruel, man. Life doesn't give a fuck about you or me. It doesn't give a shit. Nature has no conscience to it, has no empathy behind it. It just does what it does. It doesn't care about what you want, how you feel, your desires, your expectations. It doesn't give a fuck. So the best thing you can do is just to try and work on yourself as best as you can. And if you happen to meet someone, make the best of it. And if it doesn't work out, have the fucking balls to man up and be honest about it and say it's not working and move the fuck on with your life. What do you want to do? We've 20 years down the line, still be stuck in that miserable, mediocre, tedious nature of a life that you've got stuck in? Really? I don't. And I'm not going to. Don't be fooled by all this, the trappings of marriage and relationship. Trust me, a lot of it's bullshit. If you think somehow a woman's gonna fulfill all your fucking unmet needs and all your issues and insecurities, you got another thing coming. It's not gonna happen, pal. Nobody's gonna ever be able to do that for you. Not even a therapist. They can maybe help you, they can guide you, they can give you advice, but at the end of the day, that's something that will either happen naturally, or you'll have to try and force yourself into trying to change certain things about you. Some things you might be able to change, and some things you'll just have to manage. You'll have to live with them as best as you can. I'm not a cold, heartless person. I really am not. But the older I get, the more I realise you just don't have time, man. You don't have time to being in unhappy relationships or toxic friendships or in toxic jobs, toxic workplaces, being around annoying, obnoxious people that you don't relate to, you've got nothing in common with. Fuck those people. Fuck them. You got to live your life how you want to live it. Do what you want to do. Find what you think is some kind of solitude or happiness for your life, for what you want. Because if you're lucky, you're going to get 75, 80, maybe 85 years out of this life. And that's it. You're fucking done for. That's it. You're finished. You're going to be in a box. You're going to be turned to ash, and that's it. Nobody gives a fuck. Nobody cares. Find your own happiness instead of trying to rely on other people to fulfill it for you, to give you some sense of happiness. That's the mistake so many people make, especially men, especially young men. They think that, if I just meet a woman or if I get a girlfriend, I'll be happy, everything will be hunky-dory and I'll be set for life. No, you fucking won't, pal. Because then you bring on a whole other realm of difficulties and challenges that you've got no idea about. Trust me. You can call me, you can say I'm full of shit about this or that. You can call me all sorts of things and tell me I'm this or that. I don't give a fuck. Say whatever you fucking like. I really couldn't give a shit. But you can't say I'm not right about some things. As you know damn well I am right about a lot of things I talk about in my videos on my channel. You know it. Maybe I'm not as articulate as other people. Maybe I'm not as eloquently spoken as other people. Maybe I'm not as intelligent as other people. Fine, I don't really give a shit. I don't give a fuck about other people's lives. I couldn't give a fuck. You do you, you fucking support with on. If you don't want to watch my videos, then fuck off and fucking subscribe and watch other people. I don't give a shit. If you want to watch my videos, watch them. If you don't, fine. You know what? It's like fucking else. Like, how many other channels on YouTube of people talking, into the fucking cameras, into their iPads, the phones, the computers, about all sorts of shit in lives? So I don't care. But do you know what? If I come across one or two people that get it, that like the video every now and again, say something meaningful and like, that was really interesting, liked what that's all that matters to me. I didn't set this channel up for thousands of subscribers. I just set it up as a personal kind of vlog, not a vlog, a kind of diary really. And if other people relate to it and like some things that I talk about, that's great. That's wonderful. But I'm not. Do you think I'm going to lose sleep if you don't comment? If you don't like, I don't give a fuck. I don't even need this channel. I don't even need YouTube. But I do it because it's just a space to express myself. You know, it's just something to do, really. It's a place where I can be honest. And hopefully it hits somebody in the feels every now and again. It connects with somebody. I don't know, maybe even inspires somebody to change their life. You know, it's like, but it doesn't really directly affect me or anything. It's just I didn't mean to go on a rant here, but you know, just sometimes it just kind of triggers me when people complain about like not having a girlfriend. It's like, I get it, you know, it makes you feel like you're an inadequate individual, like you're not enough of a man. It destroys your sense of masculinity and all this shit. I was like, I get it, man, I get it. Should have seen me when I was a teenager. I most of the guys, my friends were getting girlfriends and I didn't. Or if I did, they were very short-lived. So don't talk to me about your fucking struggles as a man or as a teenager or as a child. It's like, I've had my own shit, I've had my own problem, my own drama and baggage and crap to deal with for the last 35 years. Trust me. It's not that I don't care, it's just that it's when you think that it's only you. That's what I don't like. It's like I understand you feel like because you're the one experiencing it. You're not experiencing other people's lives, but other people are going through the same shit. Other people are going through similar things to you, or even worse, far worse than you are, or ever will. And I just think sometimes, you know, just take a step back. You know, try and look at the bigger picture a little bit. Just have a bit of gratitude in life. I'm not saying you shouldn't try and change and, you know, work towards things you want, but, you know, have a bit of gratitude, you know, have a bit of appreciation for what you do have in life. That matters as well. You know, I say all that because I'm sitting here, you know, knowing full well my relationship's doomed and it's coming to an end. I know that. I think I already accepted it. I've already started grieving it. I shouldn't say that, should I? But there you go, I have. I know it's coming. I know it's going to end in divorce at some point. I know it is. Because it's not working. It's not functional anymore. It's not healthy anymore. For both of us. And you want to sit there complaining that you've never had a girlfriend? Try spending the last fucking 10 years of your life with someone that you hoped you was going to build a life with for all to fall apart. But again, I accept that, you know, my situation is not as bad as other people's. That doesn't mean that it's not. That doesn't devalue the experience. It doesn't mean it's not sad and depressing and difficult, because it is. But at the same time, you can also appreciate that other people have got it much worse than you, that have gone through much things worse than you are. I know what it's like to go without intimacy. I know what it's like to go without sex. I know what it's like to go without that attention, that a woman's touch, you know, the connection, that the smell of a woman, the feel of a woman. I get it, man. I get it. Trust me. I get it. I really do. But you know what? Sometimes, man, you're fucking better off without it. You're better off being on your own. You're better off being single. Because the last thing you want to do is end up in a space where you're even more miserable than you currently are. Trust me, you don't want to end up like that. That is not pleasant. Where everything you do, you're analysing. Everything you say, you're analysing in your relationship. Because you don't want to annoy them, because you're this amplification of all your thoughts and emotions, and because you're worried about how they're going to be responded to. Because you're basically on a knife edge. Your relationship's basically nothing but broken glass and broken eggshells. And don't talk to me about fucking going through shit and turbulent times and difficult, depressing stuff. I've had my own fair share of it over the years. Believe me. I really have, man. I really have. You've got to find hope, man. You've got to find something. You better find something in this life to cling on to, I tell you. You better find something. Because no one's coming to save you. No one really truly cares about you apart from maybe your family. Maybe the odd friend here and there if you're lucky. But most people don't care. They've got their own baggage, their own troubles, their own complex head fuck-ups. They've all got their own head fuckery of circumstances going on that you've got no idea about for the most part, because most people don't tell other people what they're really going through, because they don't want to be judged and criticised and seen as less than blah, blah, blah. But the best thing you can do is to have the courage to accept your circumstances and move the fuck on and say, this is not working. Yeah, partly if it was my fault. I take accountability for it. I did contribute to this life. I contributed to the way that my life is at the moment. It's my fault to a certain extent. Because as long as you keep living in denial and blaming everybody else for it, you'll never move on. You'll never change. You'll never, ever improve in your life. You'll always be that lonely, sad, depressed nothingness. And I say that as someone that is that. It is those things. Has been those things. And it is anger that, I'm speaking through anger, I'm speaking through frustration, I'm speaking through disappointment, I'm speaking through my heart, really, because I feel for other people out there. I get it, and I feel for people. I really do, but, sometimes it's just hard, it's like, it's difficult to deal with it all. When you're going through so much shit yourself, it's hard to pile on other people's problems. And that's why I don't expect everybody to come across my videos, to want to watch them. I get it, and that's okay. That's okay. If you just watch a few minutes of it, that's great. If you've watched the whole thing, that's better, because then you understand the whole thing I'll be talking about properly. Hopefully I've given some depth and context and some insights and some wisdom, some advice maybe sometimes that somehow you think, yeah, David's right. He said, yeah, he was spot on about that. That's what matters to me, is the truth. It matters about being honest and saying, and having the fucking balls to say, this is not working. As much as I care, as much as I love, as much as I want and need, blah, blah. It's just, sometimes you just have to say, I've got to move, man. I've got to fucking move. I've got to take a choice. I've got to make a decision. I'm tired of fucking living this endless fucking state of like dilemma and like never knowing quite what to do all the time. It gets fucking exhausting living like that. They'll put you into that shit will put you into an early grave. And especially when the desperation sets in, you don't want that, man. I'm telling you, you really don't want to live in a hopeless, helpless state of depressive desperation. And I'm telling you, you want to talk about feelings and thoughts and emotions that are bordering on suicidal. Trust me, I've been there. So if you think all your problems are going to be solved by getting involved with that woman, or getting into another marriage, or your first marriage, or your second or third relationship, don't be so fucking naive. Don't be so naive, man. Don't get me wrong, make the best of it, enjoy it while it lasts. But trust me, it will all come to an end. It will all come to pass. Nothing lasts forever. That is just the brutal nature of reality. When you were young, your grandparents were just as real as the people you see around. They're gone. Your parents will die at some point. Your fucking siblings will be gone. You'll be gone. The world's getting fucking worse. The world's changing. The things that were normal have gone mostly now. Everything changes. Everything moves on. Everything transitions, and that is just nature. The very planet we're living on right now has gone through transition and changes, and even the universe itself. And yet we think one fucking species on this planet that we've gone, that we're somehow, some superior victims of everything and anything. It's like, I don't know. I don't want to keep ranting here, but I just think sometimes you just need to have a bit of appreciation and perspective in life. That can help you a lot. It doesn't solve things, but I just think you just got to live in the real world, man. The more that you accept reality for what it is, the less you're going to be disappointed by it. The more you mature and gain wisdom and knowledge and understanding of yourself and human nature in general, just everything in it, just pretty much everything about our lives and the way things affect us, the better, the more. You're never going to be happy, all right? That you can forget that notion. Happiness to me, just a real state of delusionment. Just kind of in many ways a bit like love. It's like, it does exist, but it doesn't last. All right? That's the best thing I can say. It's real, but it doesn't last. And it changes and it transitions, and just don't live in denial. Don't be delusional about who you are and what you want. If you want something, go and fucking get it, man. If you want something enough, go and get it. Go and put the effort in. If you don't, then don't fucking sit around complaining that you don't have it. It's up to you at the end of the day. If you want to really make the effort, you've got to go and you've got to put that work in. Again, I say that as someone that again, like other people, haven't achieved as much as I would have liked to. I haven't gotten as much as I would have liked to have gotten. But that's my fault. That is my fault. I don't blame anybody else. I made the decision to be lazy and unmotivated. Yeah, there were factors behind, but at the end of the day, I made the choices. I made my life choices out, and my life is a reflection of that. And I suggest that you do the same with your life. Be honest about mistakes and own up to them, and just say, look, either I continue to live in the state of stagnation, or I make a change, and that applies with relationships, friendships, difficult relationships with your family, your job, whatever it is. Just don't settle for less, man. Don't settle for less because you're desperate and you're insecure and you've got all sorts of unhealed wounds and stuff. Because that's essentially what I think my relationships have been. It's just I was looking for something to fill those gaps, those wounds, those traumas, that baggage. And that's why relationships don't work out, in my opinion, because we pile things onto other people, and it's unrealistic, it's unfair, even immoral, I would say. Don't do that to yourself, because it'll only come back to bite you on the fucking ass eventually. Don't do that. If you need to go to therapy, go to therapy. If you need, whatever you need to do in this life to cope, to make yourself feel better about yourself, even if it is really a bit of a delusion, you do whatever you got to do. If you want to go to the gym 5 times a week, go to the gym. If you want to diet. You want to go to do adrenaline-based sports. Whatever it is to make yourself feel something in this world, to make yourself feel alive. You fucking do you. You do what you want to do. But don't expect everyone to understand, and don't ever expect everyone to like what you do or who you are. Don't ever expect everyone to understand you. Don't expect everyone to know why you are the way you are, unless you have the courage and bravery to open up about it. Don't expect too much from women. Don't expect too much from men. Don't expect too much from society or culture. You're just one person in this world, one insignificant person among billions of other people, billions and billions of people that have ever lived on the planet. Enjoy what you can, Remember, your time here is limited. Make the most of it.